Welcome to the Heygen podcast. Tonight we're delving into a story that's, both eerie and deeply unsettling. A tale of ambition turned nightmare.
Yeah, this one really grabs you from the start. It's like, from hope to horror in a blink, right?
Absolutely. It begins with a young girl from Amritsar, full of promise, top of her class, landing a great job, leaving behind the warmth of home for the cold void of Delhi. The shift is palpable,
That's interesting. So, she swaps the familiarity of Amritsar for a quite alien life in Delhi, where, as it turns out, even strangers seem distant.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not just the physical environment. It's the emotional isolation, the stark contrast in human connection. She's left amidst harshness. Yep. And, that isolation then spirals into something much, much darker.
I mean, wasn't there a moment when those calls from her old friends really hammer home that sense of abandonment?
Right, indeed. Those calls, filled with mockery. Why did you even go there? They really amplified her loneliness. Basically, her support system, her connection to the one place that truly knew her, started eroding.
And that emotional void, it's almost like it becomes a doorway itself, yes?
Yeah, it's like a crack that lets in something sinister. When she finally decides to leave Delhi, she doesn't head home. Instead, she goes to this, rundown cottage on Lawrence Road. And that cottage itself feels like a character in this terror tale.
Right. A cottage with a history, reminding us that sometimes the past is all too present. And here, the owner's wife, who had died, adds a chilling twist to the story.
Exactly. This isn't just about a haunted house. It's about the essence of isolation and the unforeseen consequences when you're far from those who care. The girl not only loses her familiar world, but finds herself entangled with spirits that are, very much alive in their own tragic way.
Yes. So then comes Act 3, right? With the first chilling signs. A roommate waking up, shivering, as she hears knocks from a locked, ominous room upstairs.
Yes, and that scene is, so vivid. You can almost hear the faint whispers and feel the creeping dread. It sets off a chain reaction, shadowy reflections, inexplicable sounds. It raises the question, what is it that fuels these disturbances in solitude?
And what's really haunting, pun intended, is the progression from unsettling signs to outright chaos. A scene where a roommate is, dragged up by a mysterious force. That moment totally blurs the line between psychological terror and the supernatural.
Right? It's like a physical manifestation of her inner fears, The building, already oppressive in its silence, amplifies every creak, every whisper. And it doesn't stop there. After that incident, the new tenant is left with nothing but terror.
I found that particularly intriguing, how the tension escalated so quickly, moving from eerie knockings to, actual physical violence. It's almost as if the house itself was, alive.
Yes, exactly. And then, as we move into Act 4, the haunting takes a more spectral shape. Moments like witnessing a tall woman with long black hair standing on the terrace really give that ghostly presence and intensity.
Right. There's something that's both tragic and terrifying there. The ghost, the dead wife of the owner, haunting not just the premises but eventually our protagonist herself.
And here, the narrative starts questioning what freedom really is. It's not just geographical isolation, it's emotional and spiritual isolation that can let malevolent forces in. You see, her connection to her family weakens, and without that protective bond, the haunting intensifies.
That point really stands out. But just to challenge it a bit, don't you think some might argue that, the overall narrative could be read as merely a cautionary tale of moving too far away, rather than the supernatural being solely at fault?
That's a fair perspective. While it does caution us against isolation, it's not just the physical departure, it's the abandonment of personal safety nets. It's as though the house waits, patient and vengeful, to claim those who have let themselves stray too far from care.
Yeah, I see that. Now that leads us to the climax in Act 5, the truth of possession. The twist, where the spirit of the owner's dead wife actually possesses our protagonist, turning her life into a living nightmare.
Exactly. And the revelation that she had been possessed, that her experience wasn't just a mental breakdown, but a paranormal invasion, is both shocking and deeply tragic. It forces us to confront just how fragile balance can be when supernatural forces seep in.
And it's interesting how it takes months of healing, cleansing, prayer, even spiritual healers, to return her to normalcy. Those elements give the narrative its gritty, emotional weight, beyond just scares.
Absolutely. The spiritual healer's confirmation is a turning point. It tells us this story isn't about hallucinations or fleeting ghosts, but about a dark reality that invades existence when isolation meets malevolence.
The role of family, or the lack thereof, really adds another layer to this ghostly account. When her protective circle fades, so does her defense against this unworldly force.
Yes, indeed. It's as if the isolation itself becomes a kind of invitation, a door left unlocked for these otherworldly forces. And that's what the narrator emphasizes in the outro. If you ever feel something off, if you hear a knock when no one's there, don't simply dismiss it.
That cautionary note is powerful. It's a reminder that sometimes seeking connection with familiar warmth is more protective than sitting in isolation.
Exactly. And the imagery, the locked doors, the shadowy figures, and that fateful encounter on the terrace cements the idea that some spaces, and perhaps some decisions, are irrevocable in their consequences.
And add in the inherent tragedy of the ghost being an unloved, abandoned soul. The narrative becomes a kind of commentary on neglect. It's a bit like saying, when you neglect connections, you leave yourself vulnerable to, the monsters that thrive on loneliness.
Yes, it's like a twisted morality tale. And, it makes you reflect. Could some of these hauntings be metaphorical? Are they representations of inner turmoil and unresolved grief?
Yeah, I do wonder, though, whether some details are a bit too dramatic. For instance, the idea of a spirit so powerful that it physically drags someone upstairs. It stretches believability even within the supernatural realm.
That's true. But yeah, in ghost stories, sometimes the over-the-top elements, even if a tad exaggerated, serve to heighten the atmosphere. It's almost like a cinematic rendition of fear.
And speaking of cinematic, the vivid imagery described, those detailed pictures of the cottage and the ghostly reflections, really paints a scene, doesn't it?
Yes, the visuals are striking. They anchor the narrative in our minds. The cottage, with its one room upstairs and a little garden, becomes this eerie symbol of isolation. It's like watching a horror film unfold in slow motion, with details that linger.
And the pacing. The narrative takes us from hopeful beginnings in Amritsar to the final note of despair, all the while threading a continuous sense of dread. It's fast-paced, yet, deliberate in its build-up.
Definitely. This, progression from the excitement of new beginnings to the debilitating horror of possession is what hooks listeners. The dramatic rise and fall are mirrored in her life choices and the environment she finds herself in.
I find it interesting that the story leaves us with an ambiguous ending. The house still stands, and the haunting lingers, inviting those who dare to ignore small warnings to venture into danger.
Right? And that lingering presence speaks to a universal fear, the fear of isolation, of unseen forces waiting in the shadows. The final warning, don't ignore it, because fear is what they feed on, really gets to the heart of that.
Exactly. And it forces us to reflect. Maybe it's not just haunted houses we should fear, but also the ramifications of cutting ourselves off from those who truly care about us.
Indeed. The narrative is layered. It's a ghost story, yes, but it's also about the consequences of neglect, the sheer dangers of loneliness, and the impact of stepping into the unknown without the cushion of familiarity.
And, oh, by the way, the whole aspect of spiritual healing. That must have been quite a journey for her to recover from. It adds that raw emotional element to the tale, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It shows that recovery from such an ordeal isn't quick or painless. It takes months of cleansing and prayer, emphasizing that the scars of such supernatural encounters run deep.
Yeah. In the end, the story of the cottage on Lawrence Road is a stark reminder. Fear exploits our isolation, and it lurks in the dark corners we often leave unlocked.
Exactly, and it challenges us, almost gently, to stay connected, to listen when something feels off. Because sometimes those whispers and knocks are not just tricks of the mind, but warnings from the unknown.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive. That mix of psychological tension and genuine supernatural horror really keeps you on edge.
Indeed it does. And as we wrap up, remember, the next time you hear a knock when no one's around, maybe think twice about the silence you're leaving behind.
Right. Thanks for joining this eerie exploration. May your nights be less haunted and your connections always strong.
Until next time, stay alert and keep the lights on.